I had a tragic friend, my tragic friend, Dagmar. Her problems were always way better than everybody else's problems. If you got a divorce, well, her divorce was better because her divorce took place in the Hamptons. Later in life, when I checked in with her, um, she said that everything was just fine in her life. And that's when I knew that everything was really, really bad. Similar with my uncle Avery, he was a business executive and financial guru, and he was always on top of every detail. When I checked in with him, which turned out to be the last year of his life, he said he was doing okay, but that he had not balanced a checkbook in 6 months. I guess it shows that as we get older, we learn sometimes that we don't always get what we want, but sometimes we get what we need. Welcome to this special edition of Sunday Coffee Hour. I'm Stanley Smith. At Sunday Coffee Hour, we've been using this as a placeholder for this time during the pandemic and now beyond. It's filled the space between regular Sunday church coffee hour that was always the highlight of every Sunday at church. Sunday Coffee Hour was always a crush of people and a roar of conversation. Now, in this post-pandemic reality, we have new opportunities and challenges on the horizon. And one of those is people keep asking me now that Shannon's leaving if I'll be returning to Fourth Church anytime soon. And it's kind of a disappointing question. Perhaps the obstacle has been removed, but if you really look at it more closely, the cycle of abuse is probably still there. And the cycle of abuse at Fourth Pres really was the idea that there was just no room for dissent or any adult conversation because that all got in the way of their overriding concern for control, power, and money. At the end of World War II, the German people acted like no one knew what was going on. And to use one of Shannon's favorite words, which I'm pretty certain she doesn't know the meaning of, everyone was complicit. But at Fourth Pres, many people did speak up that we were on the wrong tact. But they were dismissed and forced to go away. Some left, some decamped, and some went underground. At St. James Cathedral, they say, other churches have their ups and downs, but not at St. James. They say that many churches have closed their doors, but not at St. James. St. James is poorly attended, and they sometimes mention that it's very likely that the building itself will collapse around them someday. Yet they don't see the glass as half full or even partially full. They see it as overflowing because it is overflowing. That's their reality. Fourth Church was a wildly successful church, a wealthy church. Traditionally, it was a rather conservative church, a fancy white people's church. I guess in later generations, it became offensive and an embarrassment. Instead of the glass half full or even partially full, it became very, very empty. And its voice became very shrill. That's the scarcity model. It's the opposite of the house falling and the tenant remaining. They've preserved their house at the expense of the congregation. We can't be less than we are to make it possible for others to be less than they are. I used to think I wasn't a very nice person. And then I realized, well, I was Presbyterian. But later in life, I've learned that I had a severe psychological disorder, and that in fact, I'm Episcopalian. Many people ask if I'll be returning to Fourth Church, and the answer to that is probably not anytime soon, but I will be returning someday when this generation has passed away, like Moses in the desert for 40 years. When this passes, I can slip back in when no one will notice. Whenever I go to Atlanta, Georgia, I always try to visit Peachtree Presbyterian. Peachtree Presbyterian is the largest Presbyterian church in the USA. The first couple times I was headed to Atlanta, Hardy Kim, the pastor for evangelism, dissuaded me. Peachtree Presbyterian, he said, was a place that I probably didn't want to make a habit of visiting. And after a while, I figured out it was because Peachtree was at the conservative end of the spectrum, the conservative end of the Presbyterian Church USA spectrum, and it was the wrong end of the spectrum. I was like, wow, thanks, Hardy. If that's your idea of being welcoming, well, you may have been ahead of your time, but maybe you should think of getting out of the business of evangelism. I first started attending Fourth Pres in the late 1980s. It seemed like a nice, conservative, traditional church. In the 90s, I traveled a lot for work and kind of drifted away. I traveled a lot between New York and Los Angeles. New York had the best shopping, and LA always had the best sex parties. When I returned to Fourth Pres in the mid 90s, it seemed a little bit more liberal. Leo Tolstoy uh, shared in the novel War and Peace that the recipe for a man's life well lived is to read a conservative paper, attend a liberal church, and be a member of a fine club. Sally Park told me once that Fourth is a progressive church with the window dressing of a traditional service. We all love window dressing. Often it's how things are presented and framed that makes all the difference. Vicky Curtis gave a sermon once about the difference between being nice and being kind. It wasn't kind to avoid having the adult conversations we needed to have here at Fourth Pres. Plus, ironically, it was a huge disservice to Shannon. This was very likely her once in a lifetime chance to crash and burn and become the actualized person she needs to be. Did it ever occur to anyone that that was the opportunity of her being there? It was for her benefit instead of ours. Of course, it would have been at our expense, but you know what? We could have afforded it. Instead, we chose the bankruptcy of being nice. I saw a made for TV film years and years ago with Angie Dickinson. In the story, she and her husband were on a sailboat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on a vacation when her husband unexpectedly dies of a heart attack. Angie finds herself on the sailboat, stalled in the middle of nowhere. She decides her only option is to come about and set off on a new tack. When she does so, the boom swings across the boat and knocks her overboard. She's shocked and starts reaching for the line trailing off the back of the boat. All of a sudden, she realizes the boat, it's in motion, and she just fails to grasp the line as the boat slowly moves away. It's a sad moment. They say in literature, a man who defends his virtue is always a comic figure. So I suppose a Presbyterian losing his soul might seem absurd. When I mentioned Shannon's leaving to Bill Fisher, he said, he didn't even care anymore. He said after a lifetime of attending church and worshiping at Fourth Pres, he no longer considered himself a church person. And then he said, I guess I've got Shannon to thank for that. One summer at coffee hour, I greeted visitors in the Garth. After the service, they said, wow, what an amazing place. I said I always encourage people to attend because it's always the same message here: God's amazing love. And anything short of that, well, then the place is just a pile of rocks. Thank you for joining me on this special edition of Sunday Coffee Hour. If you would like to join us at Sunday Coffee Hour is every Sunday at 12 noon Central Time on Zoom. I will include my email in the description of this video. I'll be happy to send you an invitation. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.